Hello and welcome to the MM+M podcast. My name is Jack O'Brien. I'm the digital editor at MM+M. I'm pleased to introduce our 2024 Agency 100 Breakdown. This is our video series where we talk to honorees from the 2024 MM+M Agency 100 list. And I want to thank Nigel for being here. You want to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, thank you, Jack. Happy to be here. My name is Nigel Downer, and I lead the team at Jack Health.
And I want everyone to know that I don't have any favoritism towards anybody on our Agency 100 list, but when they have my name in it, I do have a certain shine for that. For those in our audience that are unaware of Jack Health, who are you? What do you do? What's the mission?
Well, we'll definitely get you some Jack swag.
I appreciate 100%.
That. No, thanks for the question. So Jack Health is a global brand experience agency. So healthcare clients come to us for anything around brand experience, things like meetings and events, conference and congress experiences, and brand activations. We're sort of purpose-built to bring a new experience-first approach to healthcare. We spun out of Jack Morton a couple of years ago, and Jack, if you know, you'll be very familiar but by the end of the conversation. Jack is a global brand experience agency and the Experiential Agency of the Year in 2023, which we're quite proud of. And really the vision with Jack Health was to take the strategy and creative teams that are working on experiential work for the likes of Google, TikTok, Meta, and Airbnb, and combine that with the specialty expertise that's required to deliver work of that quality and work that's that engaging inside a regulated space like healthcare.
Gotcha. It's really interesting to hear you kind of talk about these different sectors and how it then comes back to pharma and biotech and all the brands I'm sure those in our audience are all too familiar with. When you look back at 2023, what stands out to you in terms of highlights, in terms of client work or different stuff on your end?
Yeah, I think 2023 for us was a year where we're really starting to see experiential take its place in sort of a more modern marketing mix. We're very pleased with some of the work that we've been doing, particularly when we think about the audiences that we work with on the consumer and patient front. So really excited. It's not often that you think about telling a science-first story at Coachella, for example, but we did that this year for a skincare brand, and we're right up there with Heineken and others who are giving away beer in terms of how the experience scored. So I think we're starting to see experiential really come into the mix. And I think it's because, I've been in healthcare for 20 years, and I think that what I've noticed is that sort of the most ambitious and the most curious healthcare marketers are always sort of looking over the fence to see what is it that the cool brands are doing in other industries, what's working for them, and what are brands, what are people talking about. And I think that what we're trying to do is really bring that talkability, if that's a word, and if it's not, we can decide that I invented it here today. But I think that talkability is becoming a more important metric in modern marketing. So we're here to bring that into healthcare.
It's interesting to hear you talk about that because I know that I've covered healthcare now for 7 or 8 years, and people always talk about like, oh, it lags behind other industries. Mm-hmm. It's not as forward thinking, and you're kind of taking that approach of like, hey, why don't we take these marketing strategies we see that work in other sectors and be able to apply them in an experiential way. I'm curious on that front, maybe what gets misunderstood about experiential, because I'm sure a lot of people see that and they're like, oh, that's not for us, or where can we see our brand like that? But you obviously have that vision. Yeah,
I do think, we talk about different audiences at Jack. We talk a lot about your own employees, we talk a lot about HCP audiences, and we talk a lot about patients and consumers. Oftentimes, the healthcare brand's first experience with experiential is for their own employees. How do they launch a new drug internally? How do they bring people together for a town hall? So it's often that's the first switch that goes for them, is they need to engage their own employees around something, whether it's a rebrand or a launch or something like that. And then certainly when it comes to congresses and things like that, that's where a switch is really turned on. I think with our healthcare clients, you can't just show up the same way anymore. And you've got to do something to sort of not only attract people, but also give them something. You can't give them anything of value in that space, but you got to give them an experience that is memorable. So we're starting to see a lot of pickup in that space for sure.
I'm curious from your perspective where you see growth in terms of experiential, because obviously it's something that we've seen in other sectors. and it's getting that introduction in healthcare. But then, like anything, it's, there's going to be people that follow your lead, and then it becomes more commonplace. Where is there room to adapt and innovate there?
Yeah, so I think what's really interesting is sort of post-COVID, right? Everybody kind of figured out who Pfizer was and who Moderna was, right? But other brands in the space are not as well known, and people don't know what it is that they stand for. And we're starting to see, in addition to that trend, we're starting to see more healthcare brands show up in sort of new and unexpected places, right? Sponsoring the Super Bowl or doing a Super Bowl ad or showing up at a music festival or a food festival. And consumers sniff that out as either being really authentic and transparent, or kind of like not. So I think where we bring a lot of value is helping healthcare brands understand when they are showing up in these sort of new and unexpected places, how do you do that in a way that's building trust and is very transparent and authentic? Because I think when you look at what consumers and patients and HCPs, who are at the end of the day people, are looking for out of their healthcare brands, is they are looking for that. They're looking for more authenticity. They're looking to understand what it is that brands stand for. And I think experiential gives you the opportunity to prove that. It's kind of one of those, what you do versus what you say.
And how do you win over skeptics too? Because I'm sure that there are people maybe on the client side that are like, why should we have our presence there? Why should we be at Coachella, the US Open, you name it?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because it is certainly still a white space, right? I think it's still a white space in healthcare, and we're seeing sort of some first mover advantages for brands that are being more active in moving there. But healthcare marketers are very data driven, right? And they are used to, for TV brands, spending a little bit more on television or spending a little bit more on digital. So we're often having to compete for those dollars. And it is about, I think, showing that we can, link the experiences that we're delivering to behavior changes. And that's something that we're investing a lot of our time into in terms of measurement of those experiences, because that's, I think, a way that we've potentially the whole events industry has trailed over the years. So that's something we're putting a lot of time into.
I'm curious because I've had a lot of conversations with leaders over the past year and a half at this point, talking about the rise of generative AI and the ChatGPT of it all. And I'm curious how maybe that factors into the experiential stuff that you do. Is that something that you've been experimenting with, putting into application?
It is, absolutely. We literally just about 2 weeks ago did an AI Fest at Jack, which had about, I think, 35 sessions. Some were live, some were pre-recorded, of sort of our best within Jack, showcasing different tools and things like that we can use in our work, so that we can be more efficient and move more quickly in AI. That was a whole week of sort of immersion and getting up to speed. And I think our whole teams, now are much more comfortable in using those tools. What's interesting, I think, for us, when I look at it from the macro lens, I think we very quickly see the benefits of AI when it comes to sort of reducing the burden of work. We're seeing that for ourselves, and we're certainly seeing that with our clients. And even if you sort of extrapolate that out to the healthcare industry in general, things like Epic AI, where a nurse can now run a report automatically on all the things that he or she has done that day. What will be interesting is what comes next. So like reducing the burden and making your job a little bit easier is sort of the first wave. It'll be really interesting as I look at sort of the macro trend for health, is how can that actually affect outcomes, right? Like, so can we actually use AI to, to read imagery, right, more effectively, to somehow diagnose things earlier, and sort of reduce what you would call sort of the diagnostic odyssey. Like, how long did it take me to get diagnosed with a certain disease? Could that have been done in 3 months instead of 12 months, and then you're now 9 months more on treatment? So we're sort of looking at it through the macro lens, bringing it back to our own experiences. Certainly, all our teams are immersed in it. We're certainly more efficient very quickly in terms of our sort of early drafting of these experiences. And when we think about using tools like Midjourney to do some early concepting and things like that. So I think it gets us closer to our clients and gets them to buy in on some of those ideas, because we can show visuals and things like that much more quickly.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear you talk about too, kind of the difference between like what you can do in an advertising and marketing space as opposed to maybe its applications in healthcare, because that's the next step of it. So.
Yeah. No, it is. And I was sort of answering that question through both lenses, right? I mean, I definitely see tons of early applications for us within our team. Even as we learn our clients, we're learning them more quickly. We're able to generate drafts more quickly. We're able to generate models more quickly. But I do think it's going to start, for us to actually go into the design of the of the experiences that we're putting together, and linking that to some of the behavioral changes that we're looking to get to, and having AI start to impact those things can only help us design better experiences.
I'm curious because we've spoken a lot in this conversation and kind of like looking back at 23 and what you were able to do for your clients. We're sitting here about halfway through 24. And I'm curious what you make of the start to this year, but also what the rest of this year looks like too for the agency.
Yeah. It's been a really busy start to the year. I think we're seeing a continuation of more focus on experiential, which is exciting for us. I think as we got a return to live, particularly with meetings and events and congresses, people started to realize that the channel needed a little bit injection of new. And that's been something that we've been happy to provide, and bring sort of new experiences to those channels. So it's been a very busy start. As I look forward, I do think the trend of brands showing up in new and unexpected places will continue. I think that's one that we've been watching for quite a while, and we see examples all the time of Pfizer sponsoring the Grammys, or Hologic with their Super Bowl ad. Just brands that you normally wouldn't associate with those things. And my argument would be that a Super Bowl ad is great. Did you get the return on it, or could you have done something experiential to really extend the impact of that? And then one of the things that we also are noticing that's really kind of generating legs around experiential is the content both for and from experiences, right? So we do a lot of work developing content for experiences, but the legs of an experience go on and on based on the content that we're developing from those experiences. So that's where we start to, when you talk about the measurement, it's not just about the measurement at that particular experience. It's all part of a much more, broadly integrated campaign.
Yeah, and having some really dynamic marketing where it's not just we've put out this one thing and it sits there. Like there is that tail that comes with it too.
I think that's a big trend, right? I think, people used to just call it events, right? An event implies that it's a singular thing. And the reality is that, modern experiential marketing is part of your mix and needs to be closely tied to all the other things that you're doing.
So Nigel, before we wrap here, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the sustainability aspects of Jack Morton. I understand that there was a vision that was launched from a corporate perspective last year. Can you walk me through what that actually looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. We're really proud of our Experience Better vision. And one of the major sort of tenets of that is a planet plan that we put together. So we're committed to being, net zero waste by 2040. Which is a very ambitious but also very necessary goal. I think one of the things we recognize being part of the events industry is that there's historically been a lot of waste created and sort of a very linear way of creating things and disposing of things. So we're working to create more circularity in how we design the experiences that we deliver, and we've been doing that for a number of years. But last year we launched an initiative called Planet, which really sort of codified for us how we do that and how we do that with each of our clients. So it's a significant commitment. It's something that we just do now as part of business. And we're really excited about it. It feels like the right thing to do. And we've taken sort of a leadership position within the industry around it. So very proud of the Planet Plan that we put together.
I'm curious if there's anything from last year that stands out as particularly notable for our audience. I know that all the other 99 agencies that you're on the list with are like, oh, we had this activation that we really liked, or this was the thing we had to overcome. What is the singular moment from last year that really stands out to you?
I mean, I mentioned it before, but I think the Coachella activation for us was a real eye-opener because it was science forward. And that is a very difficult place to tell a science forward story. A lot of our brands are asking for edutainment, whether it's for their internal audiences or, for HCPs and patients. And that was sort of the ultimate proof points of edutainment in action. And it was really interesting because, we had a very, hands-on thing where we were going through the layers of the skin and all that kind of thing. But we also had real scientists in the experience at Coachella who were like the rock stars of the experience. And, at a place like Coachella where there are actual rock stars, it was very cool to see the uptake and the fact that we got so much traffic and so many so much social traffic and amplification out of it. So that's one we're very proud of.
It's interesting, the idea of having, like, I don't know, like dermatologists on hand, and then you're competing against the likes of Kylie Jenner and Vanessa Hudgens for people's eyeballs and their
we learned a lot
selfies.
about skin aggressors and how the Coachella environment is not great for your skin.
Yeah, probably.
For many reasons.
That Southern California desert right
the
there.
desert and all of it.
Nigel, I really appreciate you being on here and being able to talk about all the work that your agency is doing and kind of this larger theme around experiential marketing. Is there anything else that our audience should know or keep in mind for the year ahead with your agency?
Yeah, no, I would say that, our goal is to start getting marketers to think about experience. We think about it experience first. It certainly needs to be part of the mix, and it's often viewed as an add-on, right? And I think that's one of the behaviors that we're most looking to change is stop thinking about events and experiential as an add-on and start thinking about how you can integrate it into your marketing mix, because it's much more powerful when it's part of sort of a broader story.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you being in here. I love being able to interview people in person. That's just the kind of nice little post-COVID
Yes, love it.
plus that we have. But it was great having you on here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Enjoyed it.